Welcome back. The last part of today, we start with a panel talk on healing, moderated by Magnus Elias Rosengarten, talking to Nathalie Anguissomo Mbabikoro, and Elsa Mbala, whose artistic interventions you experienced earlier. Magnus Elias Rosengarten is a writer, cultural journalist, interviewer, and artist. He primarily works and thinks through performance, film, video, dealing with the complex relationships between bodies and space in contemporary art. His work is driven by the rich knowledge archives and systems of the global African diaspora. Magnus completed his undergraduate degree in American Studies and Area Studies Asia Africa at Humboldt University, Berlin, Germany, and subsequently pursued an MA in Performance Studies at New York University, Tisch School of the Arts, graduating with distinction. He's also editor of the Talking Objects blog. Please also check out his work there. Thank you, Magnus, for being here today. Thank you, Elsa. Thank you, Nathalie. The stage is yours.
Thank you to the entire team in Nairobi and also the audience that is present here in Berlin, and of course also all the people that are watching us digitally. Because I'm not a huge fan of introducing or reading out loud biographies, I think we kind of democratically agreed upon you guys introducing yourselves before we jump into the discussion. So why don't you start, Elsa, and then...
Gladly. Yeah. So I'm Elsa Mbala. I am a sound artist and educator based in Berlin. I was born in Cameroon and raised partly in Karlsruhe and in the world, I guess. And currently I am studying African rhythms in my practice. I've been a singer-songwriter for more than 10 years, so it's a big shift for me to now delve more into electronic music and what you can actually do with samples. And leaning on today, speaking about archives and African heritage, I see that as a way to reconnect with something that I may not have access to. Yeah, thanks.
Can you hear me now? Thank you. Thank you, Elsa and Magnus. It's a real pleasure to be here. Actually, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I'm not so good with introducing myself because I like to introduce myself through my work that you will see later. So my name is Anguissomo Mbabikoro. I'm a visual artist working with different ways to narrate untold stories and retelling on untelling stories that were made for the given. And I've been growing up in different places in the world. So my family is from Gabon. I grew up there. And I also lived in the Netherlands for leukemia treatment for 10 years. Which continued in France and then in the UK, where I was teaching as a professor of philosophy, and I quit the institution and work on my practice much more. And coming to Germany, the way to anchor into the city or to integrate into the communities was to actually look for the story of what happened to my great-grandfather who had died in a German concentration camp in Bitam in North Gabon. And so because of that, I've been dealing a lot with archives and memory in my work through performativity and trying to not replicate certain structures of racism and violence in the work.
Thank you so much, Anguissomo. Thank you, Elsa. So when I was thinking through our panel, our conversation today, and came up with this title or question, who heals here, which is might be a little provocative or even a rhetorical question. I thought we best jump into the discussion by kind of reassessing this whole idea around healing again, because it's been kind of hijacked, that term. There's a lot of different, I feel like, spheres of society, be it contemporary art, but also a lot of like neoliberal discourses that want to sell us healing through wellness or body optimizations or cosmetics or whatever. So what that term actually means is super confusing. I know that both of you in your works still, work with it or through it, or that it comes up as a term. So I'm going to start with this very open question. How you navigate through healing and what your understanding of it is. Elsa.
All right.
You take it from here. We said we did a little hip-hop session. We're going to like...
Definitely. So, yeah, I thought about it on the way here, who heals, and we just had a very nice talk before from Nairobi, where I love what one panelist said about the traumata given to the children.
Mm-hmm. The intergenerational trauma that's being passed on. Yeah.
That is being passed on. And I can only speak from my own experience, growing up in Germany and having that longing to understand my identity and where I come from, and then turning to my parents and also noticing that they had barely no knowledge of a time before colonialism, like really like nothing. And my mom liked to tell this story about like La Rue des Manguiers. Basically, when German settlers, colonizers came into Cameroon, they planted mango trees along the roads, right? And those trees are still there. And that was like her memory, her first memory when I asked her about like, what do you remember of like German occupation? Like, and it's kind of funny, right? Because mango is a delicious fruit. It's sweet and it is nourishing. And it will be, for me, it will have been the last thing I would have think of, or to put that in combination, right? I wouldn't have think of German people coming to put trees. If anything, they will build bridges that will last long. But she tells a story. And for me, I think it was also entry for me into healing, because growing up in Germany, there was so much expectation that came with this color skin. So there was a lot of fighting, not just in my family, but also outside and in school, and then having basically no knowledge of what slavery is or was or whatever. And so for me, I needed another approach to my research, my identity, to start embracing certain things, to start acknowledging that I am part German. I grew up here, I speak this German perfectly. I have a passport, even though I was running towards being Cameroonian and only looking that end, coming to Cameroon, because our history has been erased, I was forced to also look at my German heritage and what does that mean? I have a German last name, what does that mean? How does that make me feel? And even growing up in Germany, how did that affect my interaction with people? Because people don't expect me to be German. They don't expect me to not have an accent, like basic things, but also those things was basically just a way for me to like, okay, there was a pain that I needed to acknowledge. And I only got through that pain looking in Cameroon. And and I'm still on that process, I guess.
Yeah, we'll get to that later too, the question of time and healing, and if it's, ever ending, or if this whole idea of this linear process even makes sense or not. But I would also like to hear your idea, your thoughts around it, Angizumo.
Well, first of all, when I saw the title, Who Heals Here, it's a very tongue-tied title. If you say it 6 times very fast, who is here, who is here, who is here, who is here. So who is here? We are here. So I mean, from our last discussion, we talked about, healing, and you know, this sort of like packaging of it, no, and how it's been used so much by, you know, institutions committed to whiteness, and how this word or this practice of healing comes with, you know, care and solidarity and anti-racism and decoloniality. But still, the practice is so far sometimes, you know, and I mean, for me, healing is constant. You know, it's not something like, it's not a medicine where you take something once and then you feel better. It's a constant enjambe between feeling sick and feeling good again. But it's work, it's a labor. It's not, I try to think in a way that doesn't romanticize that practice, but it's about living with pain, and being able to live with through joy as well. So, and I think also what's important, you know, both of us are mothers, and I think in our practice, this was very a transforming moment also because, you know, we come from a terrain, a practice that institutionally is very, very painful and very abusive. You know, being an artist is not we have to really get away from maybe this rhetorics or this stereotype that, you know, it heals everybody or it shows the way or it's the answer. It's often that it's a whole load of career of abuse and having to dismantle systems and functions in order to find your own freedom. So I think it's, for me, it's finding these moments of freedom and also becoming a mother, whether birthing, you know, ideas or practices, relationships with people, babies, but also stillbirths are also part of birth, and it's a birth of you, and that means that that transitioning is a part of healing, because that means you are transforming, you are evolving. You will never be the same person or the same being that you were before, and that is very important in the work of healing. Is that it should be a process where it never comes back to the beginning. You always create and reinvent a new beginning, a new journey, and you are accompanied by the environment or the people around you. So I see healing as its labor. It's really giving birth. It's extremely, it's painful. But within that pain, you find this joy that can then bring you closer to your own truth. Mm.
And so if it's a constant thing, and it almost sounds like a human task, right? It's something that we are always involved in or with. Why is it so prominent right now? Why is everyone talking about it?
You can profit from it. You can make money, and but it also makes, it legitimizes the. At least in the Western context, it legitimizes white institutions to having to deal with historical and white guilt, because now we come to a moment of reparation, restitution. How do we do it? Do we need to talk about it? Do we need to bring back objects? Do we need to send money in the form of aid? And this is not the answer necessarily. And I think, when we also look at the struggles of brown and black people around the world and indigenous people, especially of women who are leading these struggles, now, some of these stories, they are being retold, or we are untelling them through our own voices because of the experience we have as queer artists, as mother artists, as being a foreigner in your own home. And it's something that people can want to be a part of this journey and can reflect themselves. We always talk about decoloniality and so on. So it's something that it's profited very much so. We always go through trends, right? And now with social media and everything, maybe it's like every 5 years there's something, but it creates different opportunities for people. It broadens maybe jobs or ideas. People do their own independent journeys or organizations, so it can be a benefit, but is always within it also a system of oppression. So that's why it's good to be cautious. So when you are in this system, it's good to be cautious of where you belong and how you are part of it.
And how do you keep these safe spaces? Because it like healing it's not a wellness program, right? It's a very serious undertaking. How do you keep yourself safe? Is that even possible?
I can only speak from my own experience that healing was, at one point, I just realized it was necessary. Also because I had fled Germany and I landed in Cameroon, and I realized that I was still dependent on European money, meaning German money. So I still had to deal with German people. But it was much easier because I was on the continent, so it got me to reflect. Why was it so hard in Germany? Like, you know? And I had to go through my own education and how I was brought up, and just this feeling of being less than, because I had no access to my culture, nothing, no heritage. Like, I didn't know about, like, basically, school doesn't teach you about really where black people come from. Like, they're just there. They're in America. They're just there. Like, they're in Caribbean. They're just there. You know? So this whole work, I had to do it for myself. And when I did that is when I finally felt more comfortable around whiteness or around other people. And it made me realize how necessary it is to challenge our educational system, or just the way we share knowledge and who gets to share it and who gets to tell the story, right? Because it takes away from our humanity as black people. And as a human, you need to know a little bit where you come from, to know where you're going. Sankofa, for many who know that, right? So for me, it was necessary to do that work once I realized that it's impeding on my life, and my quality of life was not good.
But how do you do this in a country like Germany? And you've both mentioned Germany. We are in Germany. Yeah. Germany is a very problematic place. It can be a very problematic place. It's when we were talking a couple of weeks ago. Natasha Kelly was also one of the interviewees, and she put it so bluntly and directly. You know, she said, and it's very true, Germany is 100 years behind. We live in a country where a lot of white Germans don't even know that they are white, and that's very dangerous, I think, you know, when white people can't even call themselves whites. So again, posing that question, how do we create these spaces in a country like Germany, where we are, you know, you step out into the streets and you are, I mean, literally confronted with like full-blown whiteness, you know, in all its expressions. How do you guys do it?
Yeah, but a safe space is not static. It's not one place. It's not a house or a hut, or it's a movement, you know, because actually, I mean, it's funny that, yes, whiteness is part of the need to build safer spaces, but sometimes even within our community, the complexity, because of people not knowing their grounds within themselves and their histories and where they're coming from, not having their vocabulary and the tools to be able to make their work, it also creates it dismantles and creates a conflict within those communities. You know, I think the thing is, you know, the communities are very plural. You know, maybe as we are sitting here, we are seen as one image, as one people. But we come from very different experiences, very different backgrounds, very different languages, you know. But we understand each other because we are going through the same struggle. And for me, a safe space is not a place. A safe space for me is the people that I am engaged with. It's the love that I have and the commitment and the support I make and I have from those people. And I for me, it's like a sort of, it's an underground railroad, you know, how you cross over, up and down, bring these, like, you know, messages and methods to keep as safe as possible, you know. We cannot, we cannot experience the world, you know, so beautifully, so pure. We don't want that. We need to have our own experiences to understand what the struggle is all about. And if you want to join the struggle, then you need to live it. The only difference is when you go through the struggle, do not be alone. And understand the commitment is that you don't do things on your own. You do things together with each other. So we talked, I had this conversation with Jennifer Kamau from International Women's Space, and thinking about what does this Underground Railroad look like in the context of, Europe and Africa, for example, that the movement is not just north and south, it's east and west, it's diagonal also. And what are we exchanging? What are we learning from each other? We are exchanging experiences, and they're very emotional experiences. And in order to keep this safe, so that when you're traveling, you don't get haunted or you don't get lost, you know, you need to be with the people who are going to accompany you in this journey. So that's how I see, you know, safe spaces, you know, when we are in our practice and we exchange our practice to do the work that we need to do.
Do you want to add something else, or?
Yeah, I definitely feel like the people, your community makes your safe space. That is a very, very important point. And I also would like to add that we as people, we can actually create those safe spaces. And they don't have to be physical. Something as healing for me has been music. And just by engaging with music the way that I do now, I found myself so much more loved, if that makes sense, by using what I use to make those sounds, and just finding this mixture, like maybe like electronic instrument, but mixed with wooden percussion instrument from Africa and Moog from different places. I know it can sound very superficial, but for me, when I reflect about my practice now, because I'm a singer-songwriter and I used to sing with a guitar, which I still very much love, but the way that I created my practice today has just been really a way to create a space that feels like love, because I also felt like the outside world could be very traumatic, especially to a female black body, on so many levels. Not just in a hateful way, even in a loving way, like my family. It's trying to teach you things that will make you feel safe, but that ultimately it just neglects your humanity also. The way that you need to feel protected by your family, but also by your community. And the lack thereof can create heavy wounds in a psyche. And I think for me, it was that, like, I was constantly fighting for air. Growing up in Germany, I guess it was also puberty, but it was also the environment that was just like nagging and not giving you that space that you actually need as a body to grow fully into the person that you need to be.
You were already diving into your practice, which I think is great, because you do work with sound, and sound obviously breaks through time and space and is multidimensional, and you create your own soundscapes and environments and also realities to a certain extent. But then you're also in Berlin, which is very known for its electronic culture and its very brutal erasure of black sound too. You know, the techno scene is known for that. There's actually this amazing Afro-German scholar, Alex Wahili, who wrote an essay about that, which really like showed me again how racist that German and Berlin techno community actually is. But you work with electro too a lot. Yes. What does it do to your sounds?
I had this. I am currently a mentee at Amplify Berlin, and I'm working with Heinbach. He's well known in the electronic nerdy scene, and we had this very liberating session. We basically went into the studio the second day, and he was very open enough, and he let me play what I wanted to play, right? And we had Ableton as a music program to work with, and I tapped my music, and he was struggling to find the tact, which tact it is. And then he put one random one, and then the whole thing that I recorded could not fit because the program was like just trying to put everything, and it didn't make sense, and he was struggling. And I found it was so liberating for me, because I've been struggling. I've been doing electronic, like delving into recording myself at least for like almost 10 years now. And it's been a pain. And for a moment I thought I was stupid. And yeah. And like I couldn't manage to put the music I had in my head on the screen. It didn't work. And it was so liberating to have this man that has years and years of experience with electronic, like he builds them up, he destroys them, everything. And he was struggling with my simple rhythm. It was really like a dun, 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 dun. He was struggling. And it was so liberating. And then he sent me this article that Pitchfork sent about like how we need to decolonize electronic music. And he made ping in my head, and I was like, basically like racism and all this ism has been infleeting in all parts of our lives. And it's interesting that when I talk to people who are like, yeah, but it's not so schlimm, or like, it's not that bad, or it's not, you're making something up. It's like, now I understand, like I can look at them with more maturity, being like, you don't even know how your life will be better if you had access to actually what you could do. Because I think also what it did is just suppress human imagination. Because African rhythms and everything is just so complex. Orient also, like even music from like Japan with semitones and stuff, it cannot collect that. It doesn't understand. And even classical music notations, it has issues to write it down. And that's also why like it forces me, like I create now graphic scores, and I understand that even though it was a pain, it forces me to open up, to expand my mind, to be like, okay, the tools you were given are not the right tools for you. You have to create them for yourself. But it took a lot of strength and faith in myself to actually go down that path. But I think that what I would like to see in the future is more people like me coming to the stage and being like, you know what, if we can actually work on your system to be a helping tool for people instead of like forcing them into a grid, we could have greater understanding of many, many things, of complex things that would seem simple, because we have like layers, we have semitones to explain things. That will make a whole difference, I think.
How do you create your tools, Amizumu, if the system fails? I mean, it's always failing, but like, how do you
don't trick me now. Rephrase the question.
Rephrase the question?
Yeah.
No, I feel shot at. And I know we're going to see some shots later too, so I'm kind of like... No, I mean, this whole, like, this whole idea of, like, everything needs to be decolonized and like, is that even a question for you? Like, do you think about it, like, which, system needs to be decolonized in order for me as an artist to work with it? Like, how do you, or is that also just, it's a trend? Like, it's a trend. Decoloniality is a trend.
To be honest, I never considered my work as decolonizing because it was not in my vocabulary, because it's just a life struggle every day. And our work reflects our condition of how we live, how we think, how we move, how we have to survive. And now people want to theorize on the experience of Black women, They want to talk about it, they want to write about it. Like, why you want to write about it? I'm here. I'm still alive. My ancestors, they died to make sure that I would be in a safe passageway to be here, to do the work that I'm doing. So I mean, my tools have always, I have to say, I think the language in the work that I do was never understood, because it was always surrounded by whiteness. And no, but it's true. Like, like if your audience, I was very young when I had to do my performance work. It was not in the theater, it was not on stage, it was not in the galleries, it was outside on the streets. And then slowly, institutions try to appropriate you because of what you represent. And I represented something that was exotic and something that they could use, because, they would say, oh, but there haven't been any Black people in performance live art history, And I was stunned, I was shocked. So actually, often when I performed, there was huge disappointment and a lot of dismantling to do, because they expected me to perform in a certain way. like an African woman. I said, what does it mean to perform African? You know, they expected the drums. They expected a rhythm. They expected me to wear a banana skirt. They expected Josephine Baker. This was 15 years ago, so I was very young. And you know, just to give the context of my work, it's based on rituals of healing. Now I hate to use the word healing, unfortunately, but you know, but it's like certain tasks that I do. So I always go to certain spaces and live the journeys of people that I'm invited to, you know, and spend time with them and see the realities of their lives and how it affects my own struggles and my own experience as being in the diaspora in Europe or in the US and in West Africa. How is, you know, because then you see like similarities in terms of language and rituals and struggle and the need to have the safe space and be together. So usually they are several hours or days long. You know, there can be burials. There could be, for example, work where I would walk or skip or run on glass for 8 hours, you know. And that really, I think for a wide audience, it was very disturbing because, you know, for me it was healing because I was free. They understood that when they see bare feet on glass and you're walking on it, you're going to cut yourself. And I say, no, being here with you, I'm cutting myself for your energy. And the idea was that, you know, when I was walking or running on the sky, I had no cuts at all. I was not bleeding because it's a certain, you know, and that's how I got my knowledge in the way that I did my work to understand what is the environment and the people around me that I'm doing this for, and that I was extremely vulnerable in very dangerous situations, which was completely different to when I was in Cameroon, in South Africa, doing the work there, because we were doing the task together. There were no questions, no doubt about what I was doing. They understood it. I didn't have to explain anything, and there was no anticipation to, you know, for a show or a presentation on Africanicity. You know, it was just about a common struggle, and they understood it as love. It's you know, there's no fear. The work is about love. It's really about love and connecting in those moments, you know. And I had to work with people who are now, you know, who passed away because of the suppression and oppression that they have built over the years through the environment that they were in, you know, who gave me so much unconditional love and knowledge that I could evolve, you know, and work on my practice. And so actually over the years it was very strange, and how then this work that is very private and it's a private journey, that then it had to be then transferred into the theater, right? Or into a gallery. What works now? And what I understood is that it was very much a spectacle in the European or Western context. And when I was back home on the continent, then they came to do the task with me. They say, are you all right? We're going to accompany you. I'm going to accompany you with this. We're not going to leave you alone. And they understood it. It's a language. I didn't have to translate everything. And it wasn't this gaze that was going to oppress or de-identify me.
Disidentify.
Exactly.
Yeah. Disidentify, yeah.
And, you know, to the point where I got into dangerous situations, you know, yeah. That's what I mean, that our labor of work, it's dangerous. We go through situations where, you know, there are different kinds of racisms and isms, but they're also physical. You go through rape, you go through going to hospitals that refuse you because of the color of the skin, or because you don't speak the language, although you have an international, I don't know, health insurance. You know, you go through the entitlement of white supremacy. Of the entitlement of them bringing you here for very little pennies and demanding so much of you. And that's what I learned in my work. So I had to unlearn all of this violence also to understand what are the stories that I'm telling. I'm always telling stories. And often I'm not speaking it. I'm doing the work, but I'm not speaking with you. But I will take you into my work, and then you know exactly how I'm speaking with you. And having, you know, when we talk about safe spaces, you know, like to the point, I thought once upon a time I was in a safe space with a community that I thought I trusted, but it led to the miscarriage of my child, and I had a stillbirth almost at 6 months. And so that pushed me into a different trajectory of what was necessary for me to do. But then also that moment of evolution, like, starting to understand the work of ancestors. What do they say? And then I had this weird thing where in my work, then I had to work with people's ancestors. And so working, having to communicate and having to have conversations and dealing with histories that nobody wants you to remember or write about. And then you understand then the context of what is the purpose of your work. It is not for show, it is not for presentation, but it's there to ultimately dismantle the very things that you've learned in order to just make connection with people. It's very simple. And that for me is a value in my evolution.
I mean, today we are in previous panels and also the keynotes. The body came up a lot, so the body as a side of knowledge, and now you mentioning all these experiences you've went through in the past month too, your stillbirth, particularly. How did all these traumatic experiences also change your relationship to your body? Because your body is your ultimate tool also in your practice, right? You work with your body as a central tool. And what did you learn? What did you realize? Like what sides of knowledges were open to you?
Just simply the knowledge was so I could breathe. I don't see my body. I don't know if to say that the body is a tool, like to use it. It's part of me, but there are moments, of course, I feel totally disidentified from it because of these traumas. And to have to that process of healing. But, when also, I also, I had to live through 10 years of leukemia cancer. And so also the chemotherapy and the treatment that they had to do for years. So you can imagine the abuse within the hospital treatment. It's not safe. You go through an eternal abuse through the people who you're supposed to trust to heal you. And then you realize later on that this is not how things should be. And it's okay to say something. So my body was an archive to say what was going on, to tell the story. So if you can't say, because part of the trauma, you become silent, you become muted. However, the body doesn't do that. And the body is teaching me all the time through this process that something has to change, something has to be done. If you don't have the words for it and nobody understands you in this vocabulary, this body will emit it because it's your first archive, it's your first voice. And it's life. It produces life, but also it acknowledges death as a continuation of what you leave behind. So for me,
but like this language, and also feel free, also if you want to jump in, like this language the body speaks. How did you have to learn that? Are there layers to it that you continually sort of like grow into? Is it by each experience? Because it's a very different language, right? And we are lacking, I think, as humans, or we are always struggling with finding language. Maybe there is also no verbal language to it. I don't know. But we're always trying, I think, as humans, that's what we do. We do language, right? So we try to maybe describe it or find words for it, articulate it. But how, and I don't know if you can talk about it, but how do you learn? How do you deal with this language?
Vulnerability is power. So you have to be vulnerable, you have to be open to those experiences in order to grow, in order to just live. I don't want to live comfortably, I don't. I don't want to live like that. I want to live in a way that I don't want to be the same person as I was. And because also I'm not alone, there are 2 children that are with me doing this journey. And so they are seeing you doing your journey. You're not just a mother. They are seeing within what you do and how you're doing your journey, who they can become, the possibility of life otherwise than what is limited to country or to language or to the frames and structures that we know here. they understand this. So and it was my only way also to get out of these spaces, to you know, I was not looking for acknowledgement from institutions at all. I was just wanting to develop my own language and know my archive, and to be able to find a synergy with people, you know, like you and you know, it's very simple. It's very simple.
I like that a lot, vulnerability. Like, I had to learn that. That is not, unfortunately, that is something that needs to be learned. Because I think that when we grow up, we're just constantly in a system that kind of forces you to know things and to be somebody and to perform, basically. And to go back to that place of being vulnerable, to also sense things that do not have words. And coming back to the layers of language, even layers of music, right, where you can still sense certain things where you don't have words for. And I think that has been a great help for me. Also, when you're like from different corners, you speak different languages, your brain, it kind of set up in a way where certain languages bring up a certain characteristic part of you. And for me, the process of like shutting down all the voices, all the so-called knowledgeable things in me was very hard. I think I'm still on that. And but I also had to give myself credit, because we live in a society that praises us only by the things we know. And but we are so much more. We are beings that sense things. And there's so many layers in our vulnerability, in our sensibilities, that we yet have to explore, I think, as human.
But how does sound help you to do that? Do you feel like it helps you embodying someone new, or like going through these transitions?
Oh no, I think that if something that music has humbled me a lot. Yeah. I cannot pretend to be anybody when I play. It does not work, at least for me. I don't know.
And people will sense it immediately too, right?
I don't know. Look at the people who are famous in music. I don't know.
Well, but then you all, yes, I mean, there's these people are sleepwalking, but then once you have artists that come out and who like do some real shit, you sense it.
Thank you.
You sense it. I mean, maybe that's, you know, that's, I'm being optimistic here, but I think you sense the real shit. You do. I hope so.
I like to think that. I definitely like to
maybe
think
not,
that.
But like, yeah.
But I would say, like Natalie, it was just really a process. I was running from everything that seemed like Europe, that seemed like fame, that seemed like power, because of my own learning of what power can be and what powerful people can do to non-powerful people. I think I was running away from that. And it was while in Cameroon, as I said at the beginning, because of all this healing process that I had to go through, that I also realized that you are quite privileged, even to have this ability to recognize what power can do to people. That's a privilege. A lot of people don't even get the time to reflect on that. You know, they just have to hustle. So once I realized that for myself in Cameroon, I also understood that recognizing this privilege, I had to take advantage of it. I had to. Because then you just stay there and then you're like verbittered and you're just frustrated with everything, which also happened to me, of course. I think that is also a part of healing. And once I realized that for myself, I understood also like I had to find a healthy way to engage with topics such as racism, as colonialism, as capitalism, things that affected not only the society, but me and my personal story a lot. Growing up as an immigrant, poverty was always an issue. With a single mom of 3 children, immigrant to Germany. I also felt like this is the type of healing I needed, and this is the type of healing that people like me also need. And sound has been a tool, definitely, to reconnect me to myself and to that voice. But it's also definitely, and so I hope, healing. It just connects you to something that you are not aware of. And I started playing in Cameroon, which was really good for me, I think, because in that sense I felt less weird somehow, because it was Cameroon. Then I didn't have to perform. There was not so many white people around, so there was not this question even like, who are you performing for? Like, you know.
But then that's maybe part of your of that particular healing cycle of yours. You returned to Germany. You came back at a certain point, and now you're here. You're here. You're a mom. You have a child. Yeah. You live here in Berlin, and you practice your art. And so, what made you come back? And it sounds to me it was like very, very important, like almost like a caesura in your like healing experience of that. We know it's ongoing, but that particular healing experience,
struggle, because
on the continent,
basic things. Sometimes I didn't have water for 3 days. I didn't have electricity, and with my practice, that did not work. Basic things. Streets that are not built, and having accidents that happen quite often. But I was only able to recognize that because I had lived in Germany, right? That those things, for somebody that grew up there, that always has been there, it's almost not an issue. It's almost real life. But Cameroon is also particular, because I traveled to other African countries, and Cameroon is quite particular. So I like to joke and say that just because I've been to Cameroon before, like, Berlin has nothing on me. Like, you can bring it. Like, I won't get upset at 5-minute delay of the train, because I'm like, oh, at least it's coming. It's the type of things that made my return so much smoother. I was able to engage also with German people in my daily life, not just in the work environment, on a more healthy level. Also, more so because I engaged with my own culture. There was this lack that was there before, and I always felt like less than when interacting with my friends, with my white friends. Like, I went to school, I was the only African girl in my class. Like, that was my reality. And so there was always this, I don't know about my culture, which there was like a feeling of shame even attached to where I came from, which I didn't know where it came from, because we didn't touch on Africa in almost more than 10 years of school system. We didn't touch on Africa. So I wanted to know where that feeling of shame came from, that I didn't, and as a young child, it's very disturbing. There's just certain things also, as growing up African, you just don't talk about it, you accept them as they are. And this culture of silencing is very deep-rooted in Africa, in African education. Like, parents would not tell certain things to their children. It's just the way it runs. And I read a very interesting book about African spirituality, where it was like, they spoke about African sexuality and the fact that a lot of things are not said, but everybody knows them. And I find it quite interesting also when you think about like frequency and sounds and the way that it travels and it's immersive, and how powerful it is, right? Things that are not said with words, but are felt.
And kind of like omnipresent, right? It's there.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And that's a way also of giving history, of giving knowledge, right? You don't say it, but you give that vibe to the person. And I think I was also brought up a lot in that way. Like, growing up now, I reflect and I'm like, yeah. But I couldn't understand that back then, because my educational system was also very clear on what to say and how to use the words in which, So my mom is still very much an African woman, very church lady-like, very, very hidden also on certain topics. So I had to also decode. Even within my mother and I, there was a huge break that happens, not just because of my growing up in Germany, but also because of her way of communicating that I could not grasp. So I had to relearn all of that.
work through that. Okay, so we definitely have a time situation. There's 10 more minutes. I'm assuming I think you also have to get ready for your performance, which is happening in like 10 minutes. I'm wondering if you guys are okay if we open up to the audience and let them ask a couple of questions too. Yeah? Okay, let's do that. Because I know that we have a mic. Genau, there's a mic back there. And I think because all day we haven't really involved the audience that's present here, I think it would be a great opportunity to make them feel alive or like participate, be a little more active than just, you know, passive listeners. So if you have questions, it's the old game, raise your hand, make yourself visible, and the mic will follow. Okay. No courage? Aisha, thank you.
Thank you so much for this really brilliant conversation. And I can also relate to what you're saying. I was wondering, because you deconstruct this notion of healing as being hijacked, do you have other ways to express it? But maybe it's going to be a hijack again, so maybe you have to be careful. But do you have other ways to describe it, or do you keep it for yourself, other ways to, other types of language and terms? You know what I mean? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but the language is also within our connection and interaction. It's about empowerment, right? It doesn't have to come through words. I mean, yes, it's hijacked because we understand that language is highly theoretical and it has to, it's an economy of language and of knowledge. But I mean, I want to believe, and I feel that, yeah, you cannot hijack my whole story if I don't tell you. You know, I don't have to let you to be so extractive of my knowledge, of my stories, because they're not for you. You know, they're going to be for my people. And they understand that because it's the similar or the same struggle. And I don't have to explain. I'm not put into a situation of danger. So I think that, you know, I mean, it's, you know, whether it's, you know, the performativity, whether it's in making something or working with sound, it's about vibration, you know, and it's the same when you're in your room with people, you know exactly which vibrations are gonna, you start to feel each other. And that doesn't necessarily need to be a language that is theoretical or academic, and they're not then ordered to be hijacked for an economic, you know, profitability. So I would say, you know, don't let people extract from you. You don't have to tell your whole truth. The people who are going to know you, they won't ask you, but they will understand you. And so that can be the biggest protection, and it's powerful. It's love also. And, you know, I would like to think that it's something, you know, I was telling you earlier about the power of the erotic, no? It's not here, the knowledge. It's everything that's situated in the womb. It's this energy here. What is in between our legs? What comes out of our legs? What we emit with our melanin skins, you know? So now how are you going to theorize that? How are you going to turn that into a book? You don't need to. Our books is between each other. It's my commitment to you to be in a space with you and to share it knowing that I'll be safe with you. Yeah.
I think there was one more question on the right side. Kathy Ann, yeah.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much. Is the mic working? So, Anginzumo, you just said that people who know you don't have to ask questions, but I'm going to ask a question to all three of you, actually, Magnus included. So I guess to put the question really short, I think that the work of healing very much involves the work of transformation, right? And that's what I've been hearing from actually the both of you, Angenzumur and Elsa, but also because I know you, Magnus, I know that you're also invested in, kind of the work of transformation in the sense of not kind of, transforming trauma or not transforming unknowing, not transforming illusion and oppression into something that is palpable and easily understandable by, dominant society or by the status quo or by white supremacy, but something that is intimate for yourself, right? And I think what I'm hearing in this conversation is that this act of transformation and healing is something that's also extremely personal and extremely intimate. And I just wanted to ask you maybe to also, if you could speak a little bit more about that. So this idea of transformation as something that also in a way transcends, a lot of these trends that you're talking about, the work of like decolonizing things, the work of solidarity, the work, like all these buzzwords. But I think ultimately what remains is this act of transformation because it's something that's very personal for yourself. And so it's something that in a way can never be taken from you if it's done at such an intimate level of what Angenzumur was describing.
So if you put it in one question.
Sorry, yeah. I said I would keep it short, and
that's
then
the
of
journalist
course.
in me. What's the one question?
The one question is, what does transformation mean to you? In a personal sense, this work of transformation, this work of healing. If you could put it in one phrase, what would that be?
Middle child goes first.
Thank you for the question. I would like to say that transformation is letting go, for me at least. It was letting go of false ideology, false concept about myself first. And I had to acknowledge my lack of commitment also to improve my mental health and my mental state, to be able to, I think there needs to be a lack, then so that you can acknowledge, and then so you can let go of those ideas, so that new one can emerge. I'm still in the process of expecting new ones. And I think that's also that space of void needs to be there. Like, you cannot just transform and just go into a butterfly right away and fly. I think there's definitely this not knowing which direction, stopping everything, not knowing which direction, being in the void and accepting it, which takes a lot of strength, I think, and then hopefully new downloads shall come, which will allow you to start again.
I think for me it is also a very solitary and deeply personal process, but it's kind of referring to what you said, Angenzumur, that community is inevitable. It's impossible. And that's why in the West, or in Germany, I mean, I'm speaking as a German now too, that to have a community and an Afro diaspora is also extremely important, right? Like I need my people around me, and I need people who can sense me, who I don't have to. I mean, Germany is a super intellectual country. People always speak and talk and explain, and it has this, I mean, we don't have to repeat all this philosophical and all of these histories, but I think a lot of white Germans think still that they can, through explanation and speaking, get the world, and it's a lie. But they are 100 years behind, and they will need their own time. But I know that once I'm with my community and my people, I can also go through transformations, and we can mirror each other. And I also don't believe in the good life, the sort of like, whatever slogan that is, but like a deep life and a felt life, and an erotic life too, like in the Audre Lorde sense, not in this like neoliberal, but yeah. So it's community really, and yeah, I'm really thinking a lot about Germany too, and it's so tragic. I mean, I grew up here. I know I have a white family too, I have a white German family. I know white Germans very well, and it's also, it's also tragic to see that they have to catch up a lot still. And I feel what Natasha Kelly was saying a couple of weeks ago, that it's 100 years behind is actually perfect. It's an entire century, and they better find a way to catch up, really.
Which is ironic, right? Because they are so forward thinkers and builders.
But it's the big
But how
contradiction.
they're going to catch up if they are still owning the lands in Namibia that they stole, and descendants of these generals?
That's a whole,
then,
that's a whole different discussion.
But I mean, have you been listening to what I said about transformation? I totally agree with you. I don't know if I can, add something, but I feel that the moments of transformation is when you have to die in order to live. You have to die, and this is in different ways, whether it's physically or spiritually, because then you are born, you reinvent yourself, and that is necessary in order to even develop any kind of discourses, and I'm not interested in maintaining something that is already there. That is completely insignificant, and I know that this will oppress me for a long time and those around me. So there needs to be a death, what I told you last time. What did I say last time about post-colonialism?
That is the death of Europe.
It is the death
the
of
best
Europe.
teacher.
You chose that little expert.
We chose it. Yeah,
you did chose it.
Okay,
Very
powerful. We did.
Yes, I believe in the death of Europe. In order for Europe to, do you know what I mean? Like everything that we know in the society was learned, and the knowledge was extracted by Black Africans, like alphabet, mathematics, language, science, astrology, even the toilet. So that means Black Africans have been showing white people how to use a toilet and wipe their ass. That is enormous. And you just put under the carpet and say, and then, in the meantime, create a supremacy of race and otherness to legitimize that, no, we have power, we have knowledge, we have whatever, and completely erase, how did Europe get here in the first place? And if you take everything away, but it needs, they need the necessity of the death, the end of Europe, in order to even start to do, I not say to think, I say to do post-colonialism, because we are still in a time of post-colonialism, in colonialism, sorry. So in order to do post-colonialism, you need the necessity of the end of Europe. And that to a white person is, what? Because, it's like a personal attack. I said, no, because that will be your transformation. That will be your transformation. Yeah. So that's why I want to think about it. Yeah.
I want you to move over. No. But you can, you probably also need a couple of minutes, to just take your time. But I want to thank both of you. I think this was an amazing, very thought-provoking. I'm still, feeling and thinking a lot.
Yeah, because it's us.
Yes, it's us. I'm feeling myself. I'm definitely feeling myself. Yeah. Thank you so much to the audience. Thanks to the two of you. And we'll give you a couple more minutes, I think, until you start the performance. And enjoy the rest of the nights. Thank you to the audience online. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.